Welcome to the broadcast tonight from our recent trip to Paris. We begin with the Pulitzer Prize-winning architect Christian de Portzamparc, who designed the celebrated LVMH Tower in New York City.
Somewhere there is a sort of a modesty of the attitude of an architect. Before all, it has to serve. After that, it could rise a very high expression, artistic expression, but before all, it has to serve.
And two perspectives on France from two Americans living and working in Paris. Suzanne Daly of the New York Times.
There's lots of interesting social stuff being tried out here, being talked about, that I've found very interesting. Much more dynamic than I would have expected.
And Joan Juliette Bach, editor-in-chief of French Vogue.
We in America always want to learn, find out, know. In France, they want to be told something that they already know about, but they want to be told a bit more about it in a different way. And that's why we're able to bring this playfulness to the magazine. Because the given here is, I know it all already.
Architecture and two conversations about life in Paris, next.
One day, training for every job on Earth
will be available on the internet.
Are you ready?
Virtually all internet traffic travels across the systems of one company, Cisco Systems, empowering the internet generation.
Charlie Rose is also made possible by these funders.
And by Bloomberg, a provider of multimedia news and information services worldwide. This is Charlie Rose.
It's hard not to begin with probably the most highly praised building, new building in New York in a long time, the LVMH Tower. Tell me about how it began. Bernard Arnault, a well-known corporate executive in charge of a company that has to do with style and elegance and luxury goods, wants a showplace in New York City on 57th Street. A reasonably small site. You end up with a building that everybody talks about. Stone, light, it seems almost to be reaching for the sky. Tell me about the beginnings for you.
Firstly, in I think something like the middle of '94, February maybe, or March '94, some people from Vuitton came in my office.
A company now owned by LVMH.
Owned by LVMH. And I met Yves Carcel, the president of Vuitton, and they explained me that Bernard Arnault and them and LVMH and Vuitton would be wishing to make what they called a starship building.
A starship building.
Starship building in a little place on 57. And at this occasion, they would like to have a new store for Vuitton. So I began. I firstly didn't believe really, you know, even my friend architect in New York don't have occasion to build in New York. So for a French, it's just a dream. We, all of us, consider New York and Manhattan as the myth, the city of the 20th century, but it's a place you don't have any chance to build. But time to time they came, and in September they said, let's go, we take the Concorde, and then suddenly I was in front of a site, it became real. Then I began to believe in it. And I made some first sketches with probably one main idea, what could be Starship building in front of such a big building than the IBM tower.
Across the street.
Across the street, which is so tall and which is rather dark. And I understood if I would do a glass building, only glass, it would be a mirror of the IBM. You would just see the IBM on it. Secondly, there was, under construction beginning, the Chanel building beside. So it was a problem. Of course, it would not be possible to make just a twin of the Chanel.
Chanel, as they say in America.
Chanel.
Yeah.
So the site was about the same size. So if I follow quietly the zoning code, I would have the same right and the same recess line to apply. So I would just make a volume exactly the same and choosing another stone and another glass. But it's nothing to make a Starship building to have two twins, you know?
Yes.
So I had a very special problem to make something different, but something which would not be an extraordinary bottle that you would consider like a joke, and after 3 months would not belong Manhattan. So I began to work with that. The first thing were a bit strange, and then I discovered that the zoning code of Manhattan is very interesting, that you have the right to do some hollows, and slowly I arrived to break this idea of recess. You have the right that the big building would be present on a certain recess line only on one point. This was the main thing I start from that. And I think I succeeded to have something which has a great vertical unity, follows the zoning code, and I used very special transparent glass. We call that low iron glass. Yeah. This is the same glass that AMP used for the pyramid in the Louvre. And I sanded it, which makes this color very white silver. And this glass is very interesting because it softens a lot the reflection from the IBM. And the fact also that I use not plane but oblique geometry also broke this reflection. And then the building, I made cardboard model, but I explained to Bernard Arnault, this will break the reflection and the building will exist by itself, really. And he said, it will be very different from Chanel. And I am happy because it is bigger than Chanel. Because I make this hollow, then I had more area that I could build higher.
Yes.
So the building is a bit higher. And it was lefting over some volumes, and then I proposed this magic room up on the top.
Okay. As you talk, this is your building here.
Yes.
And this is Chanel.
Exactly.
Chanel, you know. IBM is across the street.
Yes.
As you talk about this.
Exactly.
Most or many of the best architects in America have been on this program. Many have said to me when I asked, what is your great regret? You know what they say. I never got to build in New York. Few have had a chance to build in New York. In terms of anything special, when you got this assignment, to the great envy and jealousy of architects, certainly in America, but out throughout the world, did you say to yourself, I have to do something unique, historic, of the next century?
It's hard to say. Probably I felt that, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I didn't express that on my room.
But did you
not to felt such a pressure.
Yeah.
I did what I follow my inspiration and the problem I felt. I had the feeling that a new chapter of New York
architecture was beginning with this building?
Architecturally, I wouldn't pretend that this building would be a success before achieving it.
Yeah.
But I had the feeling that some way to perceive the building could be a little bit different. It was a chance. I felt that, of course.
Look at this. This is the top floor, top 3 floors. It's one room, big room, magic room they call it, the magic room. You can see it
And you can have a look to Central Park from this place. That's what I said to
What's
them.
the origin of that idea?
It's just because I wanted to make a building as high as possible and at this 24th floor, it was a maximum area which was buildable, you know. Arriving on this floor was I felt the area legally permitted. But I was explaining that it was possible to use more height. So I said, why wouldn't we use the height more and not area? So make a big room there, it's possible. So this came from the difference between the top of the area, the top of the height. It was a difference, and I said, let's do something extraordinary on top. So they were enthusiastic with that.
Oh, so it was your idea to make something spectacular
on top.
On top.
Yes.
And they use it for receptions and...
They are very happy. It's used every day almost now. It's
every day almost,
yes.
yeah. Here is another view of the building this is from east of the building.
Yes, you know. It's from Madison. It's from Madison.
Yeah, to the building between Madison and 5th.
Yes, exactly.
And this is from Madison, and here is the Chanel building, and this is the other building. And it shows you how remarkable it squeezes in there, and then...
Yes. And you can see that the reflection of IBM is not really present here, but it's very strong here. And here is normal glass.
Yeah.
I use this very special glass only on the wrapped part, you know.
And this part is normal glass.
Yes, so you can see how it would have been if I used normal glass everywhere. It would just be a dark mirror.
How do you feel about this building now that it's finished, now that the critics have had their say, and now that the client is in the building?
Of course, it's a great happiness. I wouldn't think that the reception, the welcoming in New York would be so strong. And it was a very strong and praised reception, welcome, also from my friend architect in New York, over any kind of jealousy or envy. They told me, this is really great. Maybe this is the first step to have the chance to make other things. Yeah. So this is something very, I would not believe in that before, of course.
Yeah. Because in 1994, when you won the Pritzker Prize, the highest award in architecture, Herbert Mouchon, as you know, wrote about you and saying, why now?
Yes, exactly.
Everybody would understand if you got the Pritzker Prize after this building.
Yes.
You got it before.
Before.
And then Mouchon wrote at 94, why now? What's he done? And yet now Mouchon says about your building, stunning, extraordinary.
I think it's perfectly understandable. In 94, I was probably the younger Pritzker Prize. It was very...
You were the youngest at the time, and still are,
I think so.
Yeah.
And it was... My work was not very known in the United States, so it's perfectly understandable that they could have some question about. And many other architects would have deserved it before me at this moment. So it was a first thing of my generation. Since this year, Rem Koolhaas, which is the same age as me, got it, but before Tadao Ando got it. So our generation now is present in this.
A new generation of architects rising.
Yes.
Rem Koolhaas won the Pritzker
this
past year. This was your most famous building, probably, before the LVMH building, yeah? Cité de la Musique. Yeah. Tell me about that, just...
It's a very rich program about music, museum, concert hall, rehearsal hall, every kind of meeting room. And I did that like a strange new village which welcome people which come to discover music. The program is very open. It goes from Baroque to jazz to modern to world music. It's changing every week. And I did a concert hall which is adapted to any kind of music, which is an elliptic hall, and the concert hall by itself is very new in its shape, and it appears it is very good for acoustic also.
We are sitting in a cafe in Paris. Here is what it looks like downstairs.
So this picture is from 14 or 13 years ago. It became, after 6 months or 1 year.
So about 1987.
Exactly. And it took 2 or 3 months to get a very important random place in Paris.
Important
place
site
in Paris. Here was nothing before. It was 4 little old buildings. I joined them, and it became very interesting.
Having received all the accolades for the LVMH Tower in New York, what kinds of things most attract you? Most architects I know love doing museums. They seem to be the signature. Frank Gehry, Bilbao, the redesign of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. You look at different places around the world. You were very close to winning a commission in Kansas City. What do you want to do?
Of course, I would love to do some museum. I did a little one in Paris. It's an extension of the Bourdelle Museum, the French sculptor, the same period than Rodin. And many people told me this is maybe what I did the best. It's little, it's in Montparnasse. Because of the use of the light, and I work on every sculpture to find the right place. So it's something very interesting. Museum could be like what have been the churches or the cathedral in the other centuries. But I would say also that I've been asked many times in shortlist for selection committee for some museum in the United States. Nothing, not on them worked out. I did an interesting project for the extension of Nelson Atkins in Kansas City.
Yes.
That Stephen Hall won. Maybe it might be that some days I would like to do one, but I would say the program is, for me, the thing I like in this job is the variety of program. It's a new adventure. A new program is something new. The client, the people you are working for or with are new also. And the place, the city, is also something new. I did some project for Prague, for Tokyo, and for Amsterdam, and Milano, and Paris. And every time it's a new culture. And this is very
rich. Culture.
It's a new urban culture. Yeah. You have to understand, you have to feel that you respond a program, you respond a client, and you respond also a place. So all of that is so interesting that the program by itself could be offices, a dwelling, and a corporate building or museum. Of course, it's extraordinary, and you can express something. And I think what did Frank Gehry in Bilbao is stunning for everybody. It's a building which transforms also completely the city. It gives a new sense to Bilbao. It's really not only inside but outside, and urbanistically it's working.
It shows the power and impact of a powerful building.
Exactly.
You know, in terms of shaping the aesthetic and the perception of a place. What has shaped you as an architect? What architects, what ideas, what artists have influenced you?
it's funny because I wouldn't say when I began to have the idea to be an architect, it was because I have discovered drawings of Le Corbusier. I was 14 years old, I was painting, and suddenly I've seen in a book hand drawing for Chandigarh, the city in India. And I said, this is a thing. It exists, architecture. Then I realized that I was liking to travel and to make little sketches of old cities, but this is the thing. And after years and years, I would say I discovered other influence of architect and artist. You know, it's not only architect. And I would say something. I'm very in relation with artists or architects who are asking them a new question after years, in different epochs. And I think about Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yes.
He's fantastic. He began in the 19th century. In the 50s, he's doing the Guggenheim in New York. It's an extraordinary route of what has been the modernism in the 20th century. And I think this is an example because he has been moving and always being himself and being on the point of discovering the new epoch at each moment, beginning of the 20th century, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. Picasso also has been doing changing all the time. And I think it's very interesting. I admire artists which has their own expression, always the same also, but it's not me. This is something. And I would say also that an architect is not exactly a painter or a sculptor. I said Picasso, but I think something is very special with architecture. It's not an absolute art. It serves the people. It serves to make the life better. So it's somewhere there is a sort of a modesty of the attitude of an architect. Before all, it has to serve. After that, it could rise a very high expression, artistic expression, but before all, it has to serve.
Do you think computer graphics and technology is changing the face of architecture?
Definitely. It's very important. And I use, and we use in the workshop, at the same level, I began with some sketches or model, but at the same time, we use modeling in computer. And it's not the same use, but it improves very strongly the way we have the regard. It makes that we are going faster. And some parts, some shape I done for new project, even for the Palais de la Porte-Maillot, some shape we have done, we would not have been able to do without this computer because it was too complicated to calculate. And sometimes the graphic discs that we do are used immediately by machine who cut some form used for the building. We are saving 1 year of drawing with huge table to make this execution drawing, sometimes by computer. So it's open completely. But it's also a way to imagine new relation with space and form which will be open. So it's very important. The only thing is we have not to be trapped by it. We have to take care that with computer you can forget the real dimension, for instance. You can make some mistake with the scale. So I still use model, physical model and computer model. Maybe it's a bit heavy, but the models are very useful to communicate with people and clients also.
Christian de Portzamparc, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you on this broadcast. I look forward to seeing the building with you in person in New York. Thank you. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much.
We continue our broadcast from France. For many Americans, the New York Times is a daily window on the world. Suzanne Daly is the New York Times Paris bureau chief. As such, she reports on all aspects of French life. I'm pleased to be here in Paris with her today to talk about how the French see us Americans. Welcome.
Thank you.
You are interesting on this because, you're binational,
Right.
both French and American. How much of your early childhood was spent in France?
A chunk of it. It was actually my first language, and I didn't learn to read or write in English till I was about 8 years old.
But at the times, you've been covering other areas of the world, including South Africa.
Correct.
And you come back here.
Right.
What's it like?
It's, I think it's difficult. I haven't lived here since I was 35, but I've always had this feeling that I was French. Now I come here and I don't know how to do the little things. I don't know that it costs 10 francs to get a grocery cart. I don't know how to pay a traffic ticket. I don't know. The society runs in very different ways, and even though you speak the language and you have been, like, I've been here every other year all my life, but usually on vacation. Living here is another thing, and it just keeps tripping over your feet, and it's brought home to you that you are in fact not French, or at least in my case.
Then what are you?
A mongrel. A mongrel.
A little bit of American, a little bit of other things.
Yeah.
Huh? Time magazine this week, as we record this, on June 16th, and Newsweek a couple of weeks ago, have extensive articles written by the Paris bureau people saying France is moving with great velocity into the global age, globalization, new economy, being a part of what America and American technology and American corporations, but others internationally as well, have been driving. Is that true?
Absolutely, absolutely. This, in the last 2 weeks, I was reporting. I went to this school that is called INA, which is extremely prestigious, famous. Chirac went to INA, Jospin went to INA. I think 6 out of the last prime ministers did. Most of the National Assembly did. You have to pass exam after exam after exam to get that label, and then you're made. Their enrollment is plummeting. And on the ring road outside of Paris, which is not very fashionable, there's this school called EPITA, which is a computer school, and they cannot. They're batting the students away, and you know, the building needs new carpets, but the kids are there working at their computers all night long. The place doesn't close. Most of them have started new companies, startups, by the time they've graduated, and they poke fun at the French bureaucracy, and their posters to come to an event might say something like, "Are you skeptical about the 35-hour work week?" You know, they're just
try 70.
Right, exactly. They are the energy coming out of that computer school is stunning, and very different than the kind of staid, traditional schooling that was held in such high esteem for such a long time.
And where did it come from?
There's a shifting value
Determined.
system. The French, for instance, are known never to talk about money. Don't discuss money. But you know, the younger generation has been bombarded with American movies, and they've seen a different world, and it's okay to talk about money. It's okay to want to make money. The French system has been very rigorous. If you didn't pass those tests and you didn't pass them early, you were out. But they see that in the rest of the world, no tests. You have to prove yourself on the ground.
Yeah.
And they're
You know what's interesting? I walked back to my hotel this morning, and a young man that I know from the United States, Stanford graduate, started a company called Yahoo. His name is Jerry Yang, very attractive young man who's a billionaire several times over. He's standing outside his hotel, waiting for a car to take him to the airport where he's been participating in a conference. Paparazzi are snapping pictures of him like he's a movie star. And I thought, my God, that's the new world, and that's the new age. He is
heroic and bigger than life.
That's right. That's right. And the French kids are not immune to that. Yeah. And it used to be that that working for the government was the noble profession here, and now that's being questioned. Other things are so you have a real shifting of values and a questioning of the old way, and I think that France's reputation as a place that could not change was not.
It's not true.
Not true. It is
they
changing.
decided that we want to be not unlike any other country, like any other country.
Yeah, although you'd still get them saying they want to do it in their own way.
Right. American values, ideology, free market, capitalism, future, internet, all of that. It made America rich and powerful, and it made these young French men and women idolize those ideas.
Right, but with criticism.
But also, according to what you write in the New York Times, a lot of other French are saying it has bred an anti-Americanism. Explain that contradiction.
Well, I think that the two societies have parted ways on many values. The French find the death penalty abhorrent. All of Europe does. There's no more European countries that do it. And they find the violence in our society terrifying. And part of it is...
Especially young people in school, that kind of thing.
Yeah, all these... right, the guns, the violence in the school, the famous big shootings that we've had, all of which come over here. And I think that the French are somewhat lacking in the subtleties of what is America, just in the way that America is lacking in the subtleties of what is France. But on certain moral issues, the death penalty, guns, the two countries really part ways, and the French look at America
as barbaric.
As barbaric. As barbaric.
Do you think part of that is that the world of today is a world not only of the internet, but it's also the world of 24-hour-a-day international television? You do all kinds of talk about the stories.
Yeah. There's more than violence, though. The French, for instance, are criticized by everybody and criticize themselves for this huge tax rate that they pay. It's close to 50%.
Right.
It's a stunning amount. But they get something for that.
Safety net.
They have an unbelievable safety net. The other day, my daughter hurt her arm in school. I had a lunch date at 1 o'clock. I picked her up from school at 12. I took her to the emergency room. She was looked at, x-rayed, and I made my lunch date at 1 o'clock. And the whole thing cost me 300 francs, which is what?
$50.
$50. And I came out of there saying, what planet am I on? I've never seen anything like that. Yeah. It was wonderful.
Well, we just had a story in New York of gangs for a 4 or 5 hour period rampaging in Central Park, putting the fear of death into the hearts of people that they threatened. Said, I've never felt fear like that, one woman said. You know, just gangs of people.
Yeah. Well,
that doesn't happen. That's an exception.
Yeah.
That's not the rule, but it does feed the idea.
That's right, and it does come across the ocean, and so
it's
do
on the front page of your paper.
Yeah, and it and all these other areas give the sense. The French will tell you that we've built a powerful society to be admired in many ways, but a goodly chunk of our population is suffering desperately, and they don't want that. Somebody told me the other day that the difference between the French and the Americans is that the Americans value liberty and the French value equality. And you know, as the supreme...
There's something to be said for that, a lot to be said for that.
Right. And so in the same way that we know that not everybody is truly free in America to do whatever they want, they know that everybody in France is not truly equal, but that's their first goal, and it brings about a very different way of looking at life. And if your big value is equality, you look at America and you say, oof, they don't cut it for us.
Yeah, but here comes French politicians, including on this program, a socialist, the finance minister, saying, we got to cut taxes. We got too much state regulation. We got too bloated a state sector. What's happening?
Well, as a part French, part American person, I would say that the Americans got some of it right and the French got some of it right. And they're both trying to adjust. If the French have a problem on the over-bureaucracy, too high taxes side, the Americans have a problem on the not taking care of everyone in their society.
Yeah, but I'm saying the French are saying we got to change. We want to be more like the Americans in this way.
Yes, they want in that way, but they still...
They're still picking and choosing.
Well, they would still tell you they want that hospital care for every poor kid who needs it.
Yeah.
So they're not...
And they want the education for every
right.
kid
It's a
earns it.
Qualitative change. You know, they're not buying the whole enchilada. They don't say that America's got it right.
All right. Now let me turn the page. Anti-Americanism, having nothing to do with the things you said, which is their view of America as too barbaric, too cowboyish, too frontierish. America is too big, too arrogant, too powerful, too dominating, too imposing. Yes.
Well, I think that's true too. And I think the big shift in that, in the thinking there, has to do with the change in the balance of power. It used to be that Europe was tucked up under a wing and was really glad that we were big and imposing. And now there's that dynamic between the USSR and, you know, the Cold War dynamic is gone. So all of the relationships change, and America's kind of used to being able to call the shots, and everybody else was scared and towed the line. And now the Europeans can look over there, and they don't have the same incentive to toe the line, and they're allowed a little bit more freedom to criticize. And why should we line up? Why should we let you have it all? And some of the things that America does.
Yeah, but I sense it's more than that. I mean, you know more about this than I do. But we're not forcing your culture down anybody's throat. They're buying it. They're buying American records. They're watching American movies. Right. It's not that they don't have choices.
Well, the
music, movies, blue jeans, fashion.
Yes, but the markets are such. You see, for instance, today that major French film directors are making their movies in English. You know, I think the great insult of the last few months was that a French film director made Jeanne d'Arc, Joan of Arc, in English. You know, but
God.
his reasoning was,
if
he doesn't make it in English, he can't sell it. So they have less and less choice as well, and that's their fear. You know, that they're being taken over, and that there won't be room for the little guy.
Is this something that the American president, say, could change by just an attitude that we're listening and we, you know, and we're trying to be sensitive?
I think one of the things, one of the differences in Europe is that these are small countries that have lived together for a long time and are used to a certain kind of diplomacy and getting along, whereas America is a big country that's kind of used to saying, well, I got the car, I can drive it wherever I want. And so it not only is it kind of rough just because it is kind of rough, but it seems particularly rough on a continent where there's been so much having to get along because everybody owns a piece of the car. You know, so yeah, I think America could change its tone and could accept that the little guy's got to be on board too. And I'm not sure yet that they do, because they own the car.
You quoted Noel Mamère, is that?
Mamère.
Mamère, who said it's both omnipotence and ignorance. That not only is America too powerful, not only do we fear you're going to crush us, not only do we fear you, you know, you will dominate everything, including our values. We fear that you have no understanding of who we are and who and what our history is about.
Yeah. I agree with him, don't you think? I mean, even if we, and we're talking about France, which is probably high on the scale of what Americans do know about.
They know more French than they know
They don't even
Italian
know.
or
Yeah, and they've never been to Africa, or, you know. So we're talking about a country that has more attention than not. And some of these examples that people mentioned, you know, being, one guy said that when he was in California, he went there to live for 6 months at one point. The landlady asked him how his queen was. You know, and France hasn't had a queen in 200 years.
Yes. And she met an untimely end.
Right. And so that sense is, it's a double insult.
Yeah.
You know, although I have to say, every once in a while you find that the French don't know a whole lot about America either. My daughter...
Or have a prejudiced view.
Very much so. But
your daughter?
My daughter has a classmate who's from Hawaii, and she's constantly singled out to, you know, you'll do America and you can do Hawaii. As if it's a separate
And the
country.
little Hawaiian, the young Hawaiian wants to say American, American.
American, American.
What do you like best about writing for the New York Times in Paris?
I find that France is more interesting socially than I ever expected it to be. I think that Europe, you know, we debate many of the same subjects, gay marriages, abortion, euthanasia. These are issues at home too, but we tend to debate them within the country, never look at what other people do. And Europe is very interesting at the moment. Everything from Holland that is about to pass a law legalizing euthanasia, to the French are passing out morning after pills in their high schools, to a new form of marriage that they've invented called a pax, which is...
Right, it's kind of an alternative to marriage, but gives you certain rights.
Right, but it started off as something for gay couples, and it ends up being something that's being used very much by heterosexuals as a kind of a halfway between marriage. So there's lots of interesting social stuff being tried out here, being talked about, that I've found very interesting, much more dynamic than I would have expected. Especially because this is supposedly a Catholic country, but it hasn't put a lid on anything. People debate vigorously and sometimes come up with very interesting solutions.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Suzanne Daly, The New York Times. Back in a moment. Stay with us. Paris is synonymous with many things: culinary delights, monumental splendor, also fashion. 6 years ago, writer Joan Juliet Buck became the editor-in-chief of French Vogue. As an American, she seemed at first an unlikely choice, but her passion for style and culture and intellect have brought new life to the magazine. It is both experimental and a commercial success. It is a pleasure to be with her in Paris today to talk about Paris and fashion, but more importantly to talk about a career in journalism that ends up as editor-in-chief of this magazine. Welcome.
Thank you for having me,
Well, it's
Charlie.
great to have you here. Now, just tell me how you felt when he said French Vogue.
I felt, what a funny idea. Yeah. It had come around before, because when you're a novelist and a screenwriter, you have lean times.
Yeah. And
I'd been taking care of those lean times ever since I was in college by writing for Condé Nast magazines.
Right.
And as you get, you know...
And they got plenty of magazines.
They got plenty of magazines, gave me a lot of work, and they knew me. And because I had the good luck to be taken to France when I was 3,
right.
Therefore I was translating between two cultures from the age of 3. In the 80s, I was offered French Vogue once, and I said, heavens no, I'm an intellectual, how dare you? And then, you know, a few years later, I grew up enough to say, what a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And
But go ahead.
no, well, French Vogue needed fixing. And, you know, once you're around long enough, you know how to put the shoe back on the horse.
Boy, did it need fixing. I mean, here's what's interesting about French Vogue. At that time, you came in 94.
94,
right?
yeah.
94. You came in 94. Circulation's about 60, 70,000 at that time?
It was like 60.
60,000.
Yeah.
Ad revenue's down.
Yeah.
You know. Now, you can't compare French Vogue to American Vogue. American Vogue
Never.
is, what, 1 million plus circulation?
Yeah, it's 1 million plus.
Yeah. And
And
it's,
very
it's
thick.
that fat with advertising, you know. So that's... But you decided you want to go right in here and do what?
The greatest thing was, since it was really screwed up,
Yeah.
Jonathan Newhouse said, try everything.
Yes, right. Have
so,
fun.
you know, I had covers with the names of philosophers
Right.
on them. I did a comic book version, which sold nothing.
Yeah.
You know, Vogue's not meant to be a comic book. I went very girly, very intellectual, and finally it found its niche with fashion but a lot of playfulness.
Yeah.
And there was another thing. For 25 years, they'd had guest editors at Christmas, which basically meant a famous person would come
Right.
along, open up their photo album,
Yeah.
have some famous friend write something about them, pose for 3 pictures, and you get this horrible issue.
Yes. Yeah.
And my idea was, if the staff is
You go
good,
maniacal to it.
yeah, absolutely,
insufferable
and
degree.
silly, and then they'd give a cocktail party.
Right.
And I thought, if people are talented enough to do Vogue the rest of the year, they're talented enough to do it at Christmas. So I started these themes. The first one was the movie issue.
All right, show this. This
Where-
was
where we
pretty
read-
good, pretty good cover.
It was beautiful, huh?
Yeah. Very inspired.
It's Marlene Dietrich, or if you want to be fashiony, it's Karen Mulder.
Yeah.
And of course, now it's nostalgic because film isn't going to be with sprockets anymore. Everything's going to be digital.
Oh wow, is that already here?
That's happening. A lot of films
Yeah.
at Cannes were digital.
Really?
You know, France is very technological, so
Oh, I know it is.
everybody's
Yeah.
talking digital these
That's
days.
why. I mean, they in fact, they have a lot of good French high-tech companies.
Yeah,
And,
incredible.
let me walk through Vogue. We'll come back to what French is. So what's the next one we ought to look at, just to show the evolution of an editor?
Okay, another Christmas issue. That is the science issue. For this issue, I thought there was a lot going on in science, and
Yeah.
I thought that fashion and science had actually mixed.
Now, what year is this? This is
This
99?
This is 98.
98.
A fashion editor came forward and said, actually, I have a degree in advanced mathematics. Another fashion editor came forward and said, I have a degree in physics,
Yeah.
as did a photographer with dreadlocks.
Yeah.
So I had my team. However, the rest of the gang wasn't too happy. Therefore, the following year, I did Love. Now this is what's
this?
yeah. Now
All
this
right.
is what's interesting.
All right, I'm
Can
coming back
you
to
show that
science in a
on
moment.
English American
Of
TV?
course we can.
Yeah. Okay. So what's interesting? I gave them a hard subject. The issue, the science issue, was an absolute blast. This one, the love issue, I was thinking like an American. Love, universal love, Christmas, angels. But I was dealing with the French staff. When you say love to them, they think it means intercourse. So there's a lot of sex in this issue.
Wait, what? When you say love, they... In other words, if you say... Well, explain that to me.
Well, basically, if you say love in a French editorial
They're thinking
meeting,
that you're talking about... If you love someone, that means somebody you're sleeping with.
yeah, it's only sex. So every fashion sitting that came in, you know, there's 8 to 12 pages of fashion, were all about sex, and everything was sex. We got a letter, now this is not pretentious, we're in France now, we got a letter that George Sand is supposed to have written in 1860 to a lover, where if you read it, normally it's a very boring letter. If you read every other line, it's deep pornography. And I took this to my legal advisor in the office, and I said, can I publish this? He said, no problem. And then we got a young French writer to do the same thing today. So I meant to give everybody love for Christmas, and in fact, I gave them all sex.
Well,
But what's interesting is science sold better.
Because it's France, and we don't have 1 million plus people all ready to jump on us and criticize us, because so much is at stake.
Right.
And we can be different because maybe the nature of France is that we can be different.
Profoundly different. That's exactly it.
You know? Well, what is that part about?
There's an enormous streak of individualism in France. Most French people that you will run across, unless you're running across CEOs, most couples aren't married. There's a statistic. Only 10% of French couples are not married and are not going to get married. Most people I know here have children without getting married, and these are, you know, people in the media, the kind of people who in America would be getting married, having kids, getting a country house and all that. Everything is kind of free-floating, because even though there's a very rigid education, the French express themselves in their private lives and in their private beliefs in a much freer way than Americans.
They express themselves
Yeah.
in their private life in a private way much freer than Americans.
Yeah.
And what, but is it in terms of their lifestyle or in terms of...
It's in
I mean,
terms
clearly
of
the way they define themselves. They're saying marriage is not necessary, institutions are not necessary.
Right. They hate institutions.
We will define our own selves.
Yeah, and but they do it. In America, we all tend to do things together at the same time. We read passages, and then everybody has a midlife crisis. In France, it's sort of many, many individual journeys. There's no way of making a caucus in France. You can't sort of assemble people by demographics, hair color, age, maybe a little bit by where they live, because where they live is linked to where their parents lived, often. There's a thing that runs through property. Until the new kind of consumerism hit in the last 2 years, when suddenly everything's going great again in France and people are shopping again, people would rather buy a studio apartment for their 2-year-old child to move into when he's a student than buy a new car or, you know, some silly new sofas or something really exciting like that.
Now, are you trying to make this magazine... You're not trying to make it more intellectual. You're just trying to what? To say...
Matching the level of the audience. The audience, the public in France, is incredibly demanding, very well educated. There's an incredibly high level of, you know, education across the board. Quirky. No French woman needs a magazine to tell her how to dress, because, goddammit, she knows how to dress. Therefore, and the reason I won't show black in the magazine is the first thing a French woman will wear, and that's why I'm wearing black sweaters. The first thing she'll buy is a black sweater. Therefore, we don't tell her to buy a black sweater. It's done already. You know, the New York Times doesn't tell you to have some coffee in the morning. It's just
Except that you'll have Times with your coffee or coffee with your Times.
Exactly. Therefore, we're talking to an audience that's so different from the American audience. We in America always want to learn, find out, know. In France, they want to be told something that they already know about, but they want to be told a bit more about it in a different way. And that's why we're able to bring this playfulness to the magazine, because the given here is, I know it all already.
Now, is life different now because this is a success? When you first arrived here, you had to have sort of put blinders on and said, everybody has an idea about what I should do, and everybody has an idea as to why I'm right or wrong for this. Everybody has, you know, opinions about this. The only way I can make it succeed is to keep my focus on the mission.
Well, their ideas didn't interest me. The only ideas that interested me were the people who were going to work for us. What is extraordinary, okay, it was 3 years of blinders and total concentration, and, you know, then the circulation went from 60 to 106, 108, whatever it is now.
You know, your friend Charlotte Rampling described you in one article as lonely at the time you took this job. Lonely. Someone else said tough but not rough. Someone else said, I worried, fragile but strong. All these kinds of mixed descriptions came about. It would seem to me, you know, that this ought to be, for you, the best of times.
It is.
You know, so you feel the strongest you've ever felt. You feel the sense of the most creative, because it is my theory on life that, you know, that if in fact you get traction, you know, it builds up the muscles to do all kinds of things that are interesting, and to dream and to be creative and do all other things. Yes?
Isn't traction something that chiropractors do to you?
No, that's fact. No. Traction is something when you're on ice, and all of a sudden you feel that your steps are connecting to real ground.
Well, things are connecting. I didn't imagine that French Vogue, you know, 10 years ago I didn't see myself doing this. Now I can't see myself doing without it, because French Vogue is an instrument that reflects the culture. It's a fashion magazine, and it keeps developing in different directions. And then one always wonders, you know, oh, what will I be doing in 5 years? What will I be doing in 10 years?
Yeah.
Thank God I don't have time to think about
exactly,
it.
because you got
Do
things
you
to
have
do.
time to
No,
think about
I
it?
don't. And you know it'll take care of itself. And if you plan it, I mean, as Lennon once said, John
Yes.
Lennon once said that you will find, you know, life is what happens while you think about other things. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me,
Well, it's
Charlie.
great to have you here. Thank you for joining us in Paris. See you next time.
One day, training for every job on Earth
will be available on the internet.
Are you ready?
Virtually all internet traffic travels across the systems of one company, Cisco Systems, empowering the internet generation.
Charlie Rose is also made possible by these funders.
And by Bloomberg, a provider of multimedia news and information services worldwide.
To order Charlie Rose program transcripts and video cassettes, call 1-800-ALL-NEWS or write to the address on your screen. Please indicate show date and guest.
This is PBS.